Welcome to Dan's Talks. My guest today is Loida Lewis, a corporate executive who has one of the most fascinating life stories I've ever heard, and so been a longtime friend of mine who I met many years ago. And I think it would be good to start with the fact that you have a new book out, which once I realized that you had done that, I thought to myself, well, of course you would do that. And few people have had a life as interesting as yours, called Why Should Guys Have All the Fun? But what I want to ask you about was, this is a second book from your family. The first one was very similar, and it was called Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun? So tell us about the first book and how that came to be, and then we'll talk about the new one. We'll talk about the new one. You're from the Philippines, a small city, about an hour by plane from Manila. Tell us about it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Dan. And what an honor for me to be part of your Dan's Talks. I know we have known each other since we were in East Hampton many years ago, many decades ago.
Yep.
And your question is, how did it come about that there is a book, Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun?
I think that's a good way to start this.
How Reginald Lewis created a billion-dollar business empire. Yes, as you can see from my accent, I'm not born in the United States. I was born in Sorsogon, Philippines. And my father, who was orphaned when he was 12, his mother sent him to live with a rich uncle who was very entrepreneurial. And so from modest beginnings, my father became very successful. He became an entrepreneur. We had a movie house named after me, Loida Lewis. Loida Theater. That is the name of the movie house. And I became a lawyer because that was his dream for me. And when I passed the bar, he sent me on a round-the-world trip to be with my sister at Columbia University here in New York. And that's how it happened. Mr. Lewis was introduced. We met on a blind date. And that was it. The end of my dream. I fell in love, married him.
Hold up the book.
Children. And Mr. Lewis, when he bought this billion-dollar company, Beatrice International Foods, 64 companies in 31 countries for almost $1 billion, the first Black man to do that, that's when he started to write the book, Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun? So I've been doing that for the past 25 years. And in his book, Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun? I'm only chapter 6. So after 25 years, I said, hey, time to have part 2. And that's when I wrote the book, Why Should Guys Have All the Fun? So that's the story.
I'll segue into that. I first heard about you before I met you because you and Reginald purchased one of the largest estates, if not the largest estate in the Hamptons, in the Bell estate, which was Mr. Bell's old home on about 200 acres in East Hampton. And then you were there sometime. I had not met you, and then there was a fire, and the place burned. And the next time I ran into you was at the top of what's now it was then the Pan Am building, and you had a book party for a book you wrote about how to immigrate to the United States from the Philippines. And but at the same time, your husband had passed away. And tell us about that and what happened.
Well, as I said, we were on top of the world. Mr. Lewis was in the 9 West 57th Street for the Beatrice International Foods that he bought in 1987. And so we started to live in Paris. 5 years, we were on top of the world, living in Paris, having this Georgian estate, the Bell Estate in East Hampton, having a Fifth Avenue apartment, and having his own private jet. And 5 years later, Mr. Lewis had brain cancer. And from the time of the biopsy, in 3 weeks, he was gone. And you can imagine, Dan, the grief and sorrow and shock that
Yes.
I had. It was totally devastating. But I am glad that I am Christian, that I am Catholic, because I never lost faith that God will not abandon me. He will not leave me orphan. And so during that time, it took 1 year for me to recover myself. And after that, after I sort of, okay, what do I do? And for my 2 daughters, I will be both mother and father to them. For the company, after interviewing 5 different men, naturally, all white, naturally, except one Latino, Puerto Rican, all of them were asking for a lot of money, which is good. It's $1 billion company. 2 billion billion dollars. Asking for asking for a lot of money, so which is okay, a CEO, but none of them would assure me that they will make it successful. All I could say, I'll try my best. And so when I was thinking to myself, what if it fails? And then I'm pointing to them, why did you do that? So I said, 3 fingers are pointing at me. Take responsibility for the company. And
Yes.
you are responsible, Loida. Take responsibility for yourself and the family. So if it fails, your fault. You don't have to point to anybody else. If it succeeds, that means to say you had the wisdom and the discernment to choose the right people around you to help it make it successful. And so that's why I took over.
I remember going to the, I guess the first day or so of your being in the offices in a big office building here in Manhattan, and they had a Philippine shaman, I think, and he was blessing the premises, and I thought, this is $1 billion company and more, and Loida is. Let's see what happens. So what happened?
What happened is that I dismissed 50% of the corporate staff because it's common sense. You don't have to be an MBA, a PhD. If your company, if your income, because Mr. Lewis died, a strong leader died, 50% of our business is ice cream. And in 1993 summer, it rained in Spain and France and Germany and Italy and the Canary Islands and in the northern states. So our income was down for that year. The worst recession in Europe. If your income is down and your expenses are up, simple, common sense.
Right.
Reduce expenses, increase income.
Right.
And so that's what I did. So for the first year, I dismissed half of our staff. Our corporate office, Tyne West, was 35,000 square feet. So I negotiated with the landlord and we went down to 10,000 square feet because I dismissed and gave very generous termination pay to all the executives, to all the report staff. And so on the first year, we already had, not in the red, but 1 million in the red. In the black. 1 million net profit. Second year, 9 million net profit. Third year, 11 million. Fourth year, 15 million. By the 5th year, I started to sell the different companies. And I got in 7 years, I increased sales by 2 billion. And then when I started selling each company that we had, I got back 1 billion and paid all the taxes.
So how did you find the courage to do this? You were I know you were trained as a lawyer in the Philippines, but to go from that to in a state of shock and mourning to take over a business of this magnitude, how did you find the courage for it? Maybe it was ingrained in you in some way.
Yeah, when I got myself together and there was a board meeting, it was very clear to me I should take over. And how did I find the courage? Well, I know myself. I was raised by entrepreneurial parents. My father was a successful businessman. My mother had her own drugstore. So I wake up in the morning, my father is going out buying shrimps, buying fish for breakfast. And he's making deals. How much is that? 100 pesos. Oh, that's too much. Making deals is nothing new to me. And I was married to Mr. Lewis for almost 25 years. I've heard him talk about deals and things like that. Third, I am a lawyer. I am not intimidated by papers. I hire a lawyer, but I know it myself. And fourth, as I said, I have faith. I have faith. I can do it. I have faith in myself. I can do it. But I also know that I cannot do it alone. I need people who are good and bright and better than I am. Yeah. So after I dismissed those that I know I cannot work with, I hired Ray Glover as my general counsel. He was my boss when I was an administrative assistant. I kept the taxman of Beatrice organization because Mr. Lewis always said, he is the best taxman, and that is Carl Brody. I kept the CEO of Beatrice International. He's been in the business for 17 years, so he knows it like the palm of his hand. But all the rest, CFO, I dismissed the CFO and I hired Peter Offerman, who was the CEO, who was the banker that gave Mr. Lewis his first deal, the McCall pattern. So all of the people that I chose, I know. And I know that they will respect me as the CEO. So that's how I did it.
I want to talk about two things that I think would be interesting. One is the tour that you were scheduled to go on with your mother and your sister. This was, your dad had a lumber company and a furniture company, I believe, and he was very wealthy and raised you and your sister. She was your younger sister, and he was telling you that you should be a lawyer and come help work for him when you grew up. And so here was this gift that you embarked upon with your mom and your sister. And describe that for a few minutes and where it went and what you did before things happened that changed everything.
Yes, my mother and I, because I passed the bar, I took the examination, I passed the bar, and my father was so happy because his dream, he wanted to be a lawyer, but he went into business. And he wanted to go into politics, but as a businessman, you don't go into politics. So all that dream was in me. Mm-hmm. So he said, all right, as a gift, go around the world, wait for your sister, she's graduating in June, go to Europe, and then back here, and I'll start your career. And his career is not for me to just be company lawyer. His dream was for me to be in the politics, because when I was 7 years old, he built a movie theater in our town, Loida Theater, so that all over the province I'm known, my name will be known, so that when I'm ready to run for public office, name recognition, Loida for governor, whatever. So that's his dream. So when we came here, we arrived in September.
Where did you go before you came here?
Oh,
on the tour, where did you?
On the tour, we went first to Hawaii, and then San Francisco, and then Las Vegas, and then Washington, D.C., and then New York.
And then from here, you were going to go to Europe.
From here, wait for my sister, we'll go to Europe, and then back to the Philippines. So it's almost like, a 1 year tour, because after that, I'm going to politics. First company lawyer, and then politics. Yeah. And so that was laid out for me, and I got it. Eventually, I want to be a senator, because there was a woman who was head of a women's university, and she became Secretary of Human Services, Secretary of Welfare, and then she became Senator Benitez. And I said, oh, that's what I'm going to be.
Oh, but when you got to New York, you paused your trip. I was reading the book, and you decided to stay there instead of a short time as in Las Vegas in California, but you were going to stay there because it was so fascinating for most of a year, and then go off to Europe. And it was during that time. So you got a job. Where did you work?
I got a job because I'm very practical. September to June is 6 months. What will I do in 6 months? You can only watch so many Broadway shows, go shopping, and I'm not a shopper. So I said I might as well work. And on Village Voice there was ad, administrative assistant, so law student, civil rights research council. Civil rights, that's good. And that's when I sent my application. But I'm very practical. If I write lawyer in the Philippines, you need an administrative assistant. You didn't need a lawyer. So I lied a little bit and I said, law student second year. So if you're a law student, fine, come in. And I got hired. Law student, Civil Rights Research Council, Ray Glover.
And what I read was that you wanted to introduce your boss to your sister when she came. And then he said, I have a friend, I thought maybe we should go out on a double date. And that was Reginald, who had gone to Harvard and business school at Harvard and was embarking on this dream. He wanted to become the wealthiest Black man in America, and he succeeded. And then it stopped and ended. And so I want to move on. And then this whole other thing unfolded. And what I also wanted to ask you about was, because I know, because I've been to your house, and you live oceanfront. You bought the Mankiewicz, these were people that own movie theaters in Manhattan, and I knew them. And you bought their property, which is maybe 30 acres in Georgia, right on the ocean. The Bell Estate property had burned, and so what attracted you to East Hampton to want to continue to be there?
Well, the very first time Mr. Lewis won a big case, we had a house in East Hampton in 1978, 3-bedroom with George Sosa as the architect, and so we were very happy there. And then when Mr. Lewis made the big time, sold his McCall Pattern Company for a 92-1 return, and then he bought Beatrice International, we found the Bell Estate. Yes. And so we were very happy there. So when it burned, we were saying, should we go to Italy, Martha's Vineyard? Why? We love East Hampton. And so we rented for 3 years. And it was at that time that the Mrs. Minskoff, because by that time, Mr. Minskoff had died. So Mrs. Minskoff said, put her house on the market. And that's what Mr. Lewis said, there it is. Because in 1972 or something like that, Leslie was 7 years old. In 1978, Mr. Lewis bought this house, 3-bedroom in Hampton Waters, and with his Mercedes 450 top down, they would go around East Hampton and stop right in front of Lily Pond on this Bellis. It's called the Mrs. Minskoff. And Leslie said, there is Daddy Warbucks. So since 1978, we have figured that out as Daddy Warbucks. So in 1990, when our house in Amagansett burned down, and Mrs. Minskoff put it up for a property, Daddy Warbucks, he made a bid, and he was overbidded by David Geffen. So he said he can have it. And then Mr. Lewis died. So in my mind, that's the property. And that's what I bought when it became available.
So What do you enjoy most about being in East Hampton? What's the attraction for you?
Well, first of all, on this estate that we call Daddy Warbucks now, you're right in front of the ocean, and we are on the highest dune. We're the highest dune on Lily Pond. And so we have, I sold half of the property that I bought because I had to pay down the mortgage to JP Morgan. But we still have the original property, the original set of acres, 6 acres from Maggie Minskoff, from whom I bought it.
I know it is absolutely beautiful and windswept.
Yes, exactly. And so you can be as private and as public as you want. And so during the COVID, that's where we retreated. And I was able to be with my grandchildren, the Christina, my younger daughter, Calvin and Sasha, and the baby, Macy. She was born during COVID.
Oh.
So we call her the COVID baby. So that's why I like, and also, you're just surrounded by nature, walk on the beach, swim on the pool, and it's just a special place. And I'm so glad that the Board of Trustees of East Hampton Village has set a very strict rules on building.
Yes.
No more than on Main Street, no more than 2 stories.
Yep.
You cannot change anything.
I
So
know.
that small town, the most small town image of East Hampton remains like that.
So your book is Why Should Guys Have All the Fun? And I've been enjoying reading it. And is it actually available and published, or is there a release date? I know I got a copy of it. So it's out?
It's been out, yes. I wanted it out in March, and it came out in March because that's Women's History Month. So I've been going around the country talking about it, and many women, I want them to realize that just like me, an immigrant doesn't speak English too good, meaning to say my accent is not American. But when a challenge comes before you, when an opportunity comes before you, don't tell yourself, oh, I'm not ready, or, oh, I might fail, or, maybe next time, because the opportunity might not come again. So I'm telling many of the women, people of color, even men, that when an opportunity comes, look at the opportunity and take it, because it may not come again, because you will never be ready. Nobody is ever ready for something like motherhood, fatherhood.
Yeah.
You learn as you get along. But as long as you have, you have your goals in front of you, you stick by a code of ethics, and you have the tenacity to do whatever it takes, because failure should not an option. More or less, you will succeed. And if you fail, tomorrow is another day. Tears may flow in the night,
Well, I
but
think
joy comes in the morning.
we should end the podcast on that note. And I want to thank you, neighbor. We live about a block apart here in New York City.
Yes, exactly.
So we'll be in touch, and thank you for being on my podcast.
Thank you very much, Dan, for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.